sorry, I'm on the wrong list. Morgan McIntosh, please. Are you in the room? Thank you. Welcome to committee. Please proceed when ready.
Thank you. Chair Reynolds, Vice Chair Johnson, and members of the Senate Select Committee on Housing. My name is Morgan McIntosh. I'm a township trustee in Concord Township in Lake County. I also serve as the chairman of the Lake County Township Association, which includes 5 very diverse townships out in Lake County. I want to thank you for the opportunity to address you today regarding the housing situation in Ohio. It's an important conversation. I appreciate the opportunity to be part of the discussion. My service in Concord Township began 15 years ago, first as a member of the zoning board and more recently as a township trustee. My testimony today will focus on the concept of adopting uniform statewide zoning, and I'm not in favor of such an approach of legislation. Will support this opinion by sharing the approach Concord Township has taken to address the lack of housing in inventory in Ohio. Concord Township embraced a strategic planning process. The process began with a study regarding anticipated growth in the township early in the first decade of the millennium. This study was followed up by the adoption of a comprehensive plan that was updated 10 years after it was first adopted. This strategic plan generated ideas and framed guiding principles that have helped shape the growth trend in our suburban township. Since the need for a strategic plan was identified, Concord Township has grown over 20%, and we are now a community of 20,000 people. The strategic plan specifically addressed the needs of additional housing and looked ahead at the changes in housing demand. There are 2 examples by which Concord Township successfully adapted to the growth in our community. First was the adoption of conservation zoning, and that is zoning that allows for higher density development up to an 11% increase in trade for the conservation of open space. The second is that we've approved more developments that higher than historical density for Concord Township in the form of single-family cluster homes and even multifamily units. Gone are the days where developers are building on 1-acre lots or more. In Concord Township, this growth has not been a burden to the community through the adoption of economic development initiatives. And that includes the adoption of a JED and targeted business recruitment in accordance with our strategic plan. Together, these tools have helped support our growing township. I respectfully request that you weigh the value of communities who have embraced these problems associated with the housing crisis and not punish their efforts in favor of communities who have taken a less active role or ignore the problem. Our success in Concord Township has not come easy. For more than 20 years, there's been a group that has been at odds, taking a very anti-growth position within our community. They continually long for Concord to remain the community it was 40 years ago. Our township administration, trustees, members of our zoning board, and our zoning department continually advocate and speak to the points of our strategic plan as we deal with developers and zoning hearings. And while certain members in our community remain reticent in their stance about anti-development, majority of the community seems very responsive when we advocate for this and talk and engage and appreciate the time that we've taken to explain the plans and what's going on in Concord. Accomplishments critical to solving the housing crisis in Ohio have taken place at the local level. Concord Township is an example of a community implementing change with regard to housing while balancing that with the needs in its community. Local advocacy is an important piece in solving this crisis. Ohio residents do not want centralized government trampling the freedom and stamping out their identity. This is particularly true in Ohio townships. Do not remove us from the process, and please make us part of the solution. My constituents, your constituents, would lose an important connection to the legislators who make these final decisions in their communities. Important facets of our communities would become lost in the deliberations of such a large legislative body. In my opinion, these decisions must remain at the local levels where they are best understood and best implemented by leaders in our community. And I'd like to just close my remarks by thanking my preceding speakers, I'm in transition, for the work that they do because it is incredibly important. And I do like to add that we welcome that sort of development in Concord, and though we often get resistance for that sort of thing, we do fight the good fight when it comes to that and other diverse aspects of serving our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions from members of the committee? Okay. Chair recognizes Senator Serino and then Senator.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. McIntosh. I'm delighted you are in my district.
Thank you.
And I live right next to Concord, so I know your situation very well. And I just want to commend you because you've outlined some of the aspects of what has made it so successful is your creative use of the JED, which is a great way to develop additional services without having to invent them yourselves and to partner with Painesville, as I'm sure you have. And your road plan, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you put together a pretty substantial road plan before a lot of the economic development started, right?
Correct. The board, the preceding board to us worked with the state, worked with loans, built infrastructure. In fact, there's a lot of road infrastructure that's really waiting for the development. It's slowly starting to happen now. But we did address traffic problems, and we're honestly waiting. It's between the state and the feds now, the next snarl. And frankly, we probably just need to push the volumes up before they'll address those.
Right, but you put the infrastructure in first, which is a smart way to do it. Just to follow up, if I could.
Yes.
So what did you made reference to at the end of to what the state might do. What are the two things that worry you the most that the state could do that would not assist you in what you're trying to do?
Well, I think in listening to the previous testimony this morning and different things here, I understand. I think what I would speak to is the diversity of the housing crisis in Ohio. I think when I take a look at what Concord Township, the process that started 20-some years ago with taking a look at what's happening and growth coming to our community, and we've pivoted or just adjusted, as I said, to the chagrin of some of our residents, a pretty healthy amount, but we continue that path. I think we need to take a look at what parts of that, we've tried to increase the inventory and be responsive to that. We've tried to adapt our zoning. Again, I want to speak to that. We've had people get upset about recovery housing, that sort of things coming into the community, but they belong there. They need to be there to support. So I think, and again, listening to the testimony from this morning, realizing that certain needs of entities as far as, zoning and or state guidance is going to be different. I think when you look at townships and unincorporated areas, I know that that's a bit of angst with developers and so forth. And I realize there are some communities that are very much, we don't want any development. Concord had the vision and knew that the demand was coming, so it took proactive steps and set it up, and we've got people flooding into the community who generally appreciate the development. And so it's sort of maybe an easier fight because people generally want it, and it's more of just dealing with that minority that's a little more vocal. Like I said, I can't underscore the value of the time and energy we put into the advocacy of that. And if we weren't part of the process, or if we were given things that we only had to follow as opposed to something we participated in, so guidelines or initiatives or incentives to do things that you see need to be met where the communities could adopt locally, in my mind, would be the more constructive way to do about it, as opposed to just asserting will and saying, just do this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Chair recognizes Senator Craig.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Sir, thank you for your testimony. I think you begin to answer several of the questions. My question certainly would have been specific recommendations from the state that might also be helpful in your work. But also, I think you started your conversation, with not the state dictating. Right. And I would say to you, I think our fundamental mission and vision is to work alongside local communities. I mean, the issues are so complex, so diverse and serious that we must begin to do the work together. So I need to just say that from the outset. But are there other specific recommendations that can be helpful to communities, your community, the townships, and others, as we begin to do our work from the state?
I think on the state side, is just to answer, when I answered Senator Serino's, I think it's just working together, the cooperative process. I only found out about the concept of there being uniform statewide zoning earlier and actually tried to dig on it. I realized other than folks testifying to the fact either for or against it at previous committee hearings, I know there's not a lot, so it was hard for me to frame remarks because I didn't see anything specific to answer. So not seeing anything that anyone's considering specifically, it's hard to answer that question as to not know what you're thinking about doing. So I would just say, continue to work with the Township Association, look to the Township Association to bring members forward to contribute to conversation as you're looking to frame different things. That's the request I would make, because listening to testimony and hearing the problems that you face, I can certainly understand. And listening to problems from this morning versus the problems we have are very different. So I think that the answer has to be layered depending on what kind of community we're talking about and what the priorities are for that area. So just being engaged in the conversation is the best part of what I would like to see.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
All right. At this time, we have Andy Rose. Welcome to committee. Please proceed.